Welcome to the Girl Means Business podcast. I'm your host, Kendra Swalls. Over the last few years, I have built a business that allowed me to quit my 9-to-5, spend more time with the ones that I love, and live my best life. Now, I'm sharing everything I learned along the way with you. Each week, my guest and I will share actionable tips, tangible advice, and honest conversations to help you build your dream business. So get ready to take notes and put in the work, because this girl means business. Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the Girl Means Business podcast. Thank you so much for coming back this week and tuning in. I think you're really going to enjoy this week's episode. It's definitely one that I think a lot of people have been excited to hear and interested in hearing more about. Because today I am interviewing the one and only Mr. Derek Swalls, my husband. I get a lot of questions from women about support for my husband. How do I get my husband to understand my business? What do I do if they don't fully support what I do? And at first my thought was I'll do a whole episode of me sharing about my tips and advice on how to get your loved ones on board with your business or understanding it better. And then I started thinking, well, why don't I just have my husband share from his point of view? Because I think it's really interesting to hear just how differently men think about things than women for the most part. And especially in my relationship with my husband, he's a very analytical realist, and I am not. I am a dreamer. I lead with emotions. And so you'll hear in the interview, we talk about that a little bit, just the fact that we balance each other out in that way. But I have learned through conversations and trial and error and arguments that we've had that I can't approach things with him the way I would approach things with some of my other female friends or entrepreneur friends, because he needs certain things to feel more confident and comfortable with what I'm doing in my business. And so I think it'll be really helpful for all of you out there that are struggling to get your spouses to understand what it is that you do on a regular basis. And I wanted to make sure that I prefaced this episode or this interview with a little behind the scenes peek into what was going on the day we recorded this interview. So I had asked my husband several weeks ago, I had the idea, I said, hey, would you be interested in being on the podcast? Here's the topic I have in mind. Here's why I think it'd be really great to have it come from your point of view and not my point of view, and for us to have a conversation about it that people can listen to. And he was a little hesitant. I think he thought I was joking at first, but he was a little hesitant, and he finally agreed. And then in the process of getting ready, this is a perfect example of the difference between him and I. To me, it's a conversation. So it's sit down, let's just talk the way we would normally talk, ask questions of each other, just let it ebb and flow the way it naturally would. He was not okay with that. He wanted to know what questions I was going to ask so that he could prepare. He had notes. He had written things down. He wanted to make sure he remembered to say. And so that's just a little bit of evidence that he thinks so much more differently than I do. And I have to remember that whenever he and I are talking about my business or plans that I have for the future. And so the day we recorded this, so I was getting ready to go out of town. And so we took the girls to his mom's house, dropped them off, ran a few errands, and then we're headed back to the house so I could pack, and we were going to record the interview. I asked him as we were driving back to the house, I said, hey, let's just kind of do like a pre-interview. Like I want to get an idea of sort of what you're thinking about saying. And to be perfectly honest, I was a little bit nervous to interview him because I wasn't exactly sure what he was going to say, because while we have had these conversations multiple times over the last several years, feelings change and things change, and you have to consistently check in. I think that's one of the big things we've learned, is that it's not a one and done conversation. It's not something you can sit down over dinner, hash it all out, and then you're good to go. You have to have these little check-ins where you're like, okay, are we really on the same page? Are we still really good? And so we're driving home and we start talking, and throughout our conversation, about 20 minutes or so, I got really upset. I was crying. My feelings had gotten hurt. And I told him, I was like, I feel like we're not in the same place. And I was very frustrated. And I told him, I was like, I don't know if I want to do this interview anymore, because I don't think that it's not going to be what I envisioned it being. And I'm worried that it's going to come across like you don't support me or you don't trust the business or whatever. And I don't want to have this turn out to be something where in the middle of the interview, I'm upset and crying. And so I told him, I was like, let's just hold off. Well, I knew I was getting ready to go out of town and I was going to be gone for a couple days and I needed to get this episode done and out. And so we're sitting there at the end of the night and I was like, I don't know. Should we do it? Should we not do it? We went back and forth. And in the end, my reasoning behind it, and I think this is going to make the interview that much better, is that our marriage, it's not perfect. Nobody's marriage or relationships are perfect. And I listened to a lot of these podcasts where couples come on and they talk about how they've worked through all the things and life is great and he just loves me and loves my business and he takes care of the house and the kids while I'm working all day. And that's not real life. I mean, it is sometimes, but 90% of the time, it's a battle. It's a struggle back and forth. It's, a balance, and it's a dance that you do with each other, and it's not always pretty. And that's the whole purpose of why I do this podcast, is I want you to not have the perfect polished version. I don't edit these a whole lot. You hear me stumble over my words. You hear me pause and think, because I want you to understand this is a conversation between you and I. And so ultimately I told him, I said, this is probably going to be better in the long run, because I don't want them to see or hear the prepared, perfect answers that you might have had in your head. I want this to be an honest, raw conversation. And there's things that he gets frustrated with in my business, and there's things that he doesn't understand about my business. And I wanted you to hear all that. So I hope that the result is that you'll find this interview to be really interesting in the fact that I think a lot of you are going to hear your own relationships in it and the conversations you're having, because it's universal. If you are a mom, if you're a wife, if you're a woman who's running a business that has any other responsibilities, you're going to hear the struggles and frustrations that we have on a regular basis and how we work through them, how we make them work, or how we're working on them, because we're not done. Like, we're not at the end. We're not at the finish line. We're in the middle of it too, but we have had multiple conversations around it that have helped us to get to a place where we feel good most of the time. And even when we don't, we're able to understand in the end that it might just be a word. In this case, it was the fact that I was using the word support. And I kept saying, you support me. Do you support me? Why don't you support me? I need your support. And to him, support means something different than what I was hearing or what I was meaning. And we had to work through that before we did this interview to understand the terminology that was being used was the problem, was causing miscommunication. So I'm really excited for y'all to hear this interview. I'm really excited for y'all to see a little bit of the inner workings of what goes on in our household. And I hope you get a lot from it. I hope you are able to see some of your own relationship in this conversation. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get to it. Here is my conversation with my husband, Derek Swalls. Hi, babe. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good.
Thanks for doing this. I know this is probably not your ideal evening, sitting here chatting with strangers you don't know on the internet.
True.
You are going to have to give more than one word answers, though. That's not how this works.
If I pause between O and K, does that count as 2 words?
No. And just know that I have control over the editing power of this show, so I can edit you to look however I'd like you to.
Great.
Yeah. Okay, so the reason I was going to have you on here was that I get a lot of questions from other entrepreneurs that talk about their spouses, their significant others, their loved ones who are not always 100% on board with their business, that are struggling to feel supported by their spouse. And so I thought that it would be, instead of me talking to people about my side of our relationship, I thought I would have you on and we could both talk about how we have gone through this together.
I can give you the male perspective.
Yeah, that's why I'm scared.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are 1 week away from our 9-year anniversary.
Yep.
Happy early anniversary.
Thanks for reminding me.
Are you buying me something nice?
I'm making a note of it now, yes.
Okay, good. That's why I did this, to give you a heads up.
Good.
For 7 of those 9 years, I have been working on starting a business, which is a long time.
Yeah.
Considering 9 years is a long time. So going back to when this all started, did you ever think that this would be anything more than just kind of a crazy hobby, like random on the side, take pictures?
I didn't really think that it would be more than just a hobby. I thought maybe I was the only one that got really into things. And when I really get into things, it lasts about 3 months. So I didn't think that this was anything more than that.
Yeah, I actually think that at one point you said to me something along the lines of, we'll see if you find something else to take its place. Like, I think you were kind of putting...
I thought you were going to find another shiny penny probably and, pick up something else.
Yeah.
So.
Well, little did you know that this was actually all your fault.
Yeah.
So, speaking of like your hobbies, I remember we had that conversation about how I was a little bit jealous of all the hobbies you had because you were hunting and fishing, and I think you were probably like playing basketball in the street and randomly with people.
True.
And doing all kinds of other stuff fun.
Yeah.
And I had no hobbies. And so you suggested, well, hey, you like taking pictures. What about that? And then you bought me my first DSLR camera.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about it now, knowing that you're kind of to blame for all this?
Well, I think, it's all worked out well. I think there's been, rough patches starting businesses, but I think everything's good and well, and I admit that I was wrong, that maybe this was just a hobby.
Wait, we have that on record. Can you say it one more time, a little slower?
No, you can edit that out, right?
So, okay. Going from you buy me a camera, I am taking pictures of the dogs and things that don't move around our house. Did I ever make you pose for me? Did I ever take pictures of you?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
no.
I think I spared you from that. I was worried that you were going to I couldn't take pictures of things that moved at the time, and I think I was afraid you were going to move.
No, I think you were afraid I was going to break the camera.
Oh, please, whatever. So, going from this random hobby, taking pictures of things, to the idea of, hey, I want this to become a business, which, for anyone listening who doesn't know, the business actually started me and my best friend. And so we had this idea. We were both teachers, and we decided to start this business together. So I know your memory is not great, but do you have any memory of me coming to you and saying, Amanda and I have started this business, and what your thoughts were?
Yeah, I thought, it was going to be interesting to see how it worked. And I remember talking about, what the name of the company should be and things like that. So one of you, maybe didn't get more credit than the other or feel like either one was, participating more than the other. But, I figured it was natural. You'd been friends forever. And I thought, it could work out, I guess, and be something for you to do.
Hey guys, quick break to talk about one of our amazing sponsors, HoneyBook. If you have listened to the show at all, you know that I am obsessed with my HoneyBook account. It has completely changed the way I run my business and keep track of client information. But there's a little known feature about it that I want to share with you today that I don't think a lot of people are utilizing as much as they should, and it makes HoneyBook stand out from all the other client management software programs out there. And that is that HoneyBook is part of the Rising Tide Society, And so with every HoneyBook account, you have access to their Opportunities tab. This is where other members of HoneyBook and the Rising Tide Society are posting their listings for things like, hey, my couple needs a wedding planner who's available on this date in this area. Or, hey, we're putting together a styled photo shoot and we're looking for a photographer, a florist, a bakery. You can search for opportunities in your area by your location, post job openings, or just connect with other entrepreneurs that are using HoneyBook. It is such an incredible part of HoneyBook and something that is really unique to their program. If you're ready to try HoneyBook for yourself, head over to today's show notes at girlmeansbusiness.com/episode 18, or you can go to bit.ly/GMB HoneyBook. That's going to give you a 14-day free trial as well as 50% off your first year. Again, that was bit.ly/GMB HoneyBook, or head over to today's show notes. All right, guys, let's get back to today's show. So at that point, you see it go from, okay, this is a hobby. She'll do something for a little while. And granted, I'm still teaching during all this, which I want to go back to. When we first were dating and married, I think you even have said to me before that you liked the fact that I was a teacher because it was a good job. It was a steady job. It wasn't something that was, you had to worry about, financially it was stable. It's a good job to have. It's flexible schedules for when we had kids and things like that. So,
Yep.
And we'll get into later on me quitting that job. But at the time when we started this business, did that ever cross your mind that this would ever be anything that kept me or that took me away from that steady, stable job you liked?
No, I felt like, both of you, especially being teachers, you had ample time, obviously in the summer and the holidays. And
I'm sorry, teachers. He doesn't really mean that.
I'm not bad mouthing. I'm just saying, you have more free time and need to fill it with something, and it made sense to do something. That's why a lot of firefighters, start businesses, because they have something to do, for 24 hours, and then they have 2 days off, or they have, other things that just make sense for them to fill their time with.
So when Amanda and I were starting the business, and then I came to you and, we realized not too far into it that first of all, we weren't doing a whole lot with it. It was just kind of more of this idea we had, and we would occasionally work on things separately. And then we decided to separately run our businesses.
You broke up.
We broke up.
Yeah.
Amicably. It was a, mutual split.
Yeah, you made her move to Colorado, but okay.
Besides that, it was an amicable split. And so when I decided to do this on my own, did that change anything about your perception of it? Or was it still the same as what you had always seen?
No, I thought it was still the same. I thought, I think your tastes in photos, was different enough that I didn't feel like it was really changing anything. Maybe if anything, it would be more financially beneficial.
And so it was at that point that I kind of made the decision. And I remember you and I talking over dinner, and I was pregnant with our oldest daughter, Brinley. And that's when I kind of said, look, I want to really work on this business. I really want to make it something that will allow me to quit my teaching job and be home. Because up until this point, until I was pregnant with Brinley, I really had the idea of I don't ever want to be a stay-at-home mom. I enjoy my job. I enjoy working. And then you get pregnant and something changes. And so I started having all these ideas of this business could be something more than just a few photo shoots here and there. And so when I said, I want to make this something more than just a hobby, did that change anything? What were your thoughts then?
I think at the time I probably thought it was the hormones talking, but there was probably other things.
It probably was a little bit.
Well, and you said a lot of things while you were pregnant and or having a child, like wanting to kill me. So you have to take those with a grain of salt, I guess, or sand.
So at what point then, as the business grew, I told you I wanted to make this into business. You probably thought, okay, that's that's great. It's just going to keep doing what you're doing. It's going to be a side business from your teaching career.
Sure.
Okay. Then I come to you a couple years ago with the idea of, hey, well, it wasn't even really an idea. It was more out of frustration of the fact that I was burning the candle at both ends. I was working full time. I was trying to build a business that was hopefully going to go full time. And it's hard to overlap both. It's hard to run, to have two full-time businesses going, or two careers at the same time.
Yep.
So as it started to grow and I started talking about quitting my job, did that give you any concerns or fears? What did that make you start noticing or realizing?
Yeah, I mean, I realized, when you had increased your business and you were really doing 2 jobs and coming home and trying to deal with the house and the kids at the time. And I think my biggest fear was probably the loss of the stable income. Like you mentioned, the teaching is, you have money coming in every month and it's the same exact amount every month. And I can plan for that, and I can, account for those things. And I think once I felt like you had enough saved and you had enough scheduled business, people were booking weddings, years in advance and 10, 15, 20 weddings in a year. And obviously I felt better about it at that point. And I think, my biggest, the biggest challenge was not, is the household going to run? It was, how are we going to be stable financially? And, maybe that's a guy thing. I don't know, but that was probably my biggest fear.
So it was less about my ability to do it, and it was just more about the fact that you wanted to make sure that we were going to be good financially in our household, that we weren't going to have to live off of ramen and sell our house, basically.
Yeah, I think from, and I don't want to be sexist or anything, but I think from a man's point of view, like I personally feel like, we want to make sure the family is safe and stable, and we want to make sure that we can provide, for the family, and we can live the way we're living and be okay. So I think that's probably the biggest, the reason it was a little scarier.
And so the next part, which kind of ties into what we just talked about, was just what are the biggest fears you had around my business and even now, like as I've quit my teaching job, I'm doing this full time. You've seen the progression of it from the hobby to what it is today, and what it's allowed me to do and how it's provided for our family. We're not eating ramen. We're not living in a van down by the river. Like we're doing okay. And so what's kind of been your progression of fear? Is it still the same as it was when I first started, or when I first started talking about photography and doing it full time? Has it changed at all? How has it progressed?
Well, I think it's gotten easier. I think it's gotten more comfortable for me. And again, I'm, maybe my perspective is just, I'm a numbers person and I have to see things out on paper. And I think the fact that you've had full-time dedication to this, you're able to do more, you're able to get more business in, you're able to do a variety of other things that you couldn't do while you were working in a teaching job. So, I think my fears were definitely lessened after the first year, or maybe the first 2 years. And I think it got a lot easier as you went along and as you grew.
Yeah, and I think, too, it's important to note that, along the way, my mentality behind a lot of this was knowing your fears and concerns and not always understanding where they were coming from, because we think very differently. You think a little more analytically and more
rationally.
Yes, thank you. And I'm a little more head in the clouds. I kind of go with my emotions versus what is probably the best choice sometimes. And I think that's a good balance, because when I dream big, you kind of help keep me grounded. But there's definitely times when that has caused conflict and misunderstanding. And so it's helpful that when I come up with these crazy ideas and I want to run with them, to have you to kind of balance that out and say, look, okay, let's think about this logistically. Like, what steps do you need to take to get there? Because in my mind, I'm just aiming for the top and not thinking about the climb it's going to take to get there. And so it helps to have that. But I also know that because there's been times when we haven't communicated that very well, that it comes across as you not supporting me or me being frustrated, or we're not on the same page sometimes. And so I think the biggest thing that's helped us is the times we've been able to have conversations about it and really kind of hash out like what it looks like for both of us. And those aren't always easy conversations to have, but I think that they're important conversations to have, because if not, you're thinking one thing and your partner's thinking something different, that's when those lines get, crossed and things are misconstrued and taken in a different way and feelings get hurt.
Yeah, and I think, that in business that happens no matter what, and in families that happens. But, if you aren't shooting for the moon, here we are on the 50th, anniversary of the moon landing, right? Somebody had the big idea that they would go and land on the moon, and they couldn't do that overnight. And it's the same with you. You can't do 20 different things overnight and make $1 million. There are things that have to happen before that, and that's and for us that's what works. And I can be the checks and balances, and I can sit down and make a list and analyze a little bit and figure out how we get to the moon. And while I support your ideas, I also know I'm a realist, and I understand that there are steps A, B, and C that need to happen before we get to that point. So I think you have that no matter what, and you can't always just run with things.
Yeah, and I think too that, like, again, sometimes it's just that communication. If you don't talk about it and you just assume that you understand what the other person is thinking, then that's when you start getting that frustration and that that you hit that wall where you just kind of think, well, my husband doesn't support me. He doesn't think I can do this. And like we have discovered, it's not a matter of you thinking I can't do something. It's just a matter of you wanting to make sure that I'm thinking it through from a logistic, realistic standpoint and not just pie in the sky, big idea dreams.
Yeah, and I think once, logically we get to a point where we've communicated all of our issues about it, I think we often agree that it's a good idea, and sometimes you agree with me and sometimes I agree with you, and that's how we get places.
Well, and for me, one of the things that I work well on, I guess, the times that I have felt like I didn't have your 100% support, or you had concerns and you had some frustrations, my go-to was, I'm going to prove you wrong. My go-to was, I'm going to work even harder to show you that I can do it, because no one's going to tell me I can't do something. And I think that it's been good for me in some ways, because I think if you were the yes man that was constantly by my side going, you got this, you can do this, you can do anything, then I wouldn't have had that drive necessarily, because I'd have been like, oh yeah, I can do it, I'll do it later. But because there were those times when I wanted to prove to you that I could make this a full-time job, and I wanted to prove to you that I could match my income from teaching and quit that job, it pushed me even further. And so in some ways, thank you for that.
Yeah,
because
that's my fault too.
You did. See, this is all you.
I'll take credit for that.
All right, so let's talk about now that I've quit my teaching job. I've been doing this full time for 2 years.
Yeah, you hate kids. I got it.
Yeah. Except our own most days. And so with me quitting teaching and being home, I think there was this idea from both of us of what would be done in our house on a regular basis, what I would accomplish, what my role was going to be. Because we both we're both full-time employees, me running a business on the side. We have 2 kids, a house, lives outside of work, family, friends. And there's always still laundry and dishes and dusting and all that kind of stuff to do too. So I felt like originally I was like, oh, I'm going to have all this time and our house is going to be spotless and I'm going to have dinner cooked every night and everything's going to be organized. How's that working out?
It's it's not.
I have realized that I'm not a housewife. I'm very sorry for that. I should have figured that out before you married me.
I didn't marry you for your cooking, so.
Well, thank you for that. I won't ask you what you did marry me for. Yeah. So how have we figured out the balance or not balance of household responsibilities? What do you think about that?
The balance is tough. I definitely had an idea of, what my at-home wife's business would be like, and I think, but I think it's also been part of that thing where you needed the time that you used to spend at work. You needed that time during the day to grow the business and to bring in that income that I need to feel stable and normal and not stressed out. So in the beginning, I think it was probably, I come home and the dishes would be full and I understand it's not 1950 and we don't all, expect the perfect little housewife, with the apron on, but, I had an idea of that. If I was home all day and I didn't have a job or work to do and, the house would be spotless and perfect. But, this is your job and the business part of this is your job and it is what you do all day. And you sometimes you have to deal with a lot more that takes your time away from other things in the house. So, we're in a partnership, and that's part of what our balance is, and that's what part of our marriage is, and the dishes are going to get done eventually, and whether I do them or you do them, somebody's going to do them, and we kind of have an understanding of I go to work and do my thing, and you have a business and do your thing, and we'll get to the rest of it, eventually.
You know what the best part about having kids here is, though? The older they get, the more they can do.
Yeah, I'm still waiting on them to mow the lawn, but...
Well, they're 3 and 7. Yeah. We'll get there. We'll start with dishes or maybe laundry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing that a lot of the women I've talked to who work from home struggle with, because I think the idea is that a lot of people think they're just stay-at-home moms who occasionally go take pictures or occasionally, sell jewelry on Etsy or whatever it is they're doing. And if you don't have that traditional storefront or office that you go to, then people assume that you're really not running a business. And if you think about what it takes to run a business that is doing well and making money and being successful, you can't do that in 2 hours of a day during nap time. You have to have the time to do it. And so there's days that I can set aside the work and I can get stuff done at the house. But most days, it's work takes precedence, because I'm like, that's what's bringing in the money and that's what's going to help us pay bills and, savings and things like that. And if we don't have that, the dishes can wait. It's kind of, if I have to choose one or the other, it's going to be business, kids, then housework, or kids, business, housework some days. So unfortunately that does fall to the wayside, and very fortunately you are great at it. You are a wonderful house husband, if that's a word.
Yeah.
And so I feel guilty a lot of times that I don't do those things, but I think that we make it work, and we just have kind of found our rhythm, and we feed off of each other. And when you see that I'm extra busy, you pick up the slack, and when things slow down, I try to pick up the slack, and we just kind of balance it out.
Make it work.
So let's talk about frustrations. Are there times that you get frustrated with my business? Like, what are the things that are your frustration points?
Well, I think, that some of the time that you're gone is, a little frustrating, but not because you're off, doing fun things and I'm stuck here. It's more selfish. It's more, I want to have an opportunity to spend time with you and the kids as well. But I think the biggest frustration, though, is how it comes in spurts. In your business, the nature of your business, oftentimes you have lulls, and sometimes you have 3 or 4 or 5 things to do in one weekend, and it's not as busy during the week. So I think that's probably one of the biggest frustrations is, and it's not the stable thing that I've mentioned a couple times. It's not the same amount of work every week or every month. It's it's kind of random, but
the consistency is hard.
It's a little hard to to deal with, and I'm a planner, and it's just kind of not my thing to have randomness.
And I think that's one thing I've just learned in life is that you have different people, and some people thrive on that inconsistency and the fact that, like, one of the things I love about what I do is that I'm in control of what I do. And so if I want to plan 3 things in 1 week and nothing for the next 2 weeks, like that, I can do that. And some people don't. They want consistent. They want to know that every week they're doing X, Y, and Z. And so the fact that I think we're different in that aspect is challenging too, because in my mind it makes sense to me. I'm like, well, I'd rather do everything I can in 1 week and then have the next 2 weeks free to play and hang out with the kids and you and get stuff done in other areas, or go on vacation or whatever. But for you, I feel like you thrive more in this is the schedule for every week moving forward.
Yeah.
So that's just been something we've had to kind of figure out.
Well, your business is able to do that. Not everybody's business is able to do that, So it's what works for us.
Yeah. Okay, so I asked the Facebook people to ask you some questions. The trolls. Well, no, they're not all trolls. Don't say that about my people. Apologize to the ladies out there.
I'm sorry, ladies.
Okay, so some of these questions are going to probably cover what we've already talked about. Some of them are not. So the first one, and I apologize, I did not write down who these came from, so I'm sorry for that. But the first question was, what's your favorite thing about your wife? Your favorite thing about your wife's business. You can answer both if you want to.
My favorite part is probably the part you just mentioned about how if you need to pick up and go with me to Vegas when I go for work or do
so
something.
Rough. Yeah, why you make me do that?
I know. But having the control of your own schedule is probably what I like the most about it. In the beginning, it was kind of cool to have play money. When you had another job and everything you did on the side was just for extra money and things like that. So that was kind of nice at the time. But I think the controlling your own destiny and your own schedule is probably the best part about it.
Yeah. So you didn't hear this because you don't listen to every episode, and that's okay. But when I interviewed Kristen, who's the owner of Shine, a couple weeks ago, we did our interview while we were in Vegas, the day that you were working.
Mm-hmm.
And in the middle of the interview, the housekeeper came and knocked on the door, and I had to answer. And so I started to edit it out, and I didn't, just because I was like, this is pretty entertaining. This is part of the fun part of this job, is that you can do it from anywhere, and you do have that fun flexibility to kind of up and go. And even while I was in Vegas, I was getting work done, and so it's pretty fun.
Yeah.
I don't hate that part either.
I know.
All right, what's your least favorite part?
Paying taxes. Does that count?
Yes, that does, because that sucks. I hate it.
Yeah.
I just paid sales tax last week.
And you shouldn't have to pay so much for credit card fees either.
You're telling me. It's not fun at all.
Yeah. That's probably, that's the consistency thing is probably my least favorite. But, taxes are a close second.
Yeah. All right. How do you feel about the amount of time that my business requires?
Well, I think any job, it's you get what you put into it, and I understand that there's a lot that goes into this. There's advertising, and there's social media and SEO and getting your ratings up on Google, etc. So all that takes time. I'm at work Monday through Friday, 10 or 11 hours. I'm away from the house every day. And so I kind of equate it to the number of hours that you spend on something versus how much money you're bringing in.
Yeah, and I think, that's been something that I thought, starting working from home, that I had this idealistic vision. There's a whole episode I did on surviving working from home, and I talked about the vision I had of like I was going to get up and I was going to go to the gym and I was going to do all these things and I was going to have all this time to get stuff done, and that by the time you got home in the evenings, I could put it all away and just spend time with y'all. And that's not always the case. So there's a lot of times that I feel guilty about the fact that like we'll sit on the couch at night and while watching TV, I'm on my laptop working. Or, we try to go to bed at the same time, but there's some nights that like I've just got to get stuff done. If I have a deadline or I've got to get something out at a certain time, then I have to stay up and I have to get it done. Or, I have to find these little pockets of time, and it's not always ideal. And I think that's, it's hard because that's also where I've held back a little bit, because there's been nights when I could work on my business 24/7 because I enjoy it so much. And I've had to remind myself that I need to turn it off and I need to spend time with you and the girls, and that that's okay to do. But it's also hard because then while you're at work thinking that I'm home getting work done, it's not always the case.
Yeah. And I'm a numbers guy, so I equate it to the amount of hours you spend versus how much money you're going to make on it. So if you're doing something for 12 hours and it's only going to make you $200, then you're really not making that much per hour. But that's a different mentality than in reality, because it takes a lot of time for you to do all your other things, your advertising and your prep and your blog posts and all the other things that take up time that don't directly bring in revenue.
Yeah.
So,
but they have to get done.
They have to get done.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question, it's a 3-parter. Ready?
Yep.
Okay. Did you support her from the very beginning? And if not, what was the reason? And looking back, were those reasons unfounded?
Well, I think support is kind of a different question. I always believed in you. I always believed from the beginning that you could do anything that you had thoughts to do, and anything that you had a big dream to do. I thought that you could do it. I think support. I didn't support you quitting your job from day one and turning this into a full-time business. I mean, and really the only reason why I didn't support that was financially. And financially, I didn't think that you could go from, working your teaching job and then just flip the switch and all of a sudden start making a ton of money doing your other job or doing your own business. And I think when I look back, the belief in you, was still the same. I think the support issue was financial, and
that's not unfounded. I mean, that's a valid.
I don't think it's unfounded. I mean, we're never going to know what would have happened if you had just up and quit your job and just come home and said, "Hey, I quit my job and I'm just going to take pictures for the rest of my life." Anything could have happened. It could have gone really well, or it could have gone to bankruptcy. I don't know. So hard to say if they were unfounded. I think I just, needed those logical numbers to be met before I would have fully supported you quitting your full-time day job.
Well, and I've said this a couple of times, I think, on the podcast, and just the fact that, when I did quit teaching, I had a lot of women ask me, like, well, how did you make it work? And how did you know you were ready to do it? And I think that this is where you had to kind of put your trust in me, because it wasn't a situation where it was like, I'm going to have 3 years of salary saved up, or even like a year's worth of salary saved up. I think I had like 3 months maybe saved up. And, that was going to get me through the fall, because as teachers, even if you quit, you get paid through the summer. And so I knew I had enough to get us through the end of the year. But going forward, I was like, I really had to make it work. And I needed that. I needed that safety net ripped away in order for me to see what I could really do. And I think that was scary for you. And I get that. At the time, it was more me being frustrated, because I was like, I know I can do this, and why don't you think I can do this? When really you were saying, I know you can do it. I just need to know that we're not going to go bankrupt. And so again, that's where it just had to come down to conversations and conversations and conversations, and having the same conversation multiple times before we realized we were on the same page and that it was okay.
Yeah, and I'm wrapped in a safety net, so I need my safety net.
You have like bubble wrap surrounding you.
It's my
at all times.
It's my Linus blanket.
It is. Okay, what advice can you give to other spouses out there with a small business wife or husband?
Well, I think everybody's situation is different, but I think, like you said, I think you'll know when you're ready, and I think, their fears and maybe anxiety about you going into this world can be solved by good communication, and I'm sure a lot of people have wives or husband that they believe in them, but they maybe have some of the same fears I had. I didn't think you had enough business to go quit your teaching job just a year sooner. I didn't think you were ready, and I think once we finally pulled the plug, I felt like we knew it was time. It was still scary because it was very uncertain, but I think you'll know when the time is right. But I knew that you would go to the ends of the earth to make this thing work, and at the end of the day, we would be fine.
Yeah. And I think, too, I needed you to keep me in check, because I would have quit way sooner than I did.
Yeah.
And I don't think that would have been the best decision. And as much as it was frustrating to me, looking back, I know that you were protecting us from something that we weren't ready for. And I couldn't see that because all I could see was what I wanted so badly. It's kind of like when our daughter wants so badly to go to Five Below and buy a toy. And she's like, but I just want it bad, and she can't see the reality of it is that, we have to go and spend money on toys that she doesn't need, that she just wants. And that was me. I was being that kid that was like, but I just want it so badly. And you had to be the parent that said, no, not right now. I
had to say, no, I want to stop stripping. You have to keep your job.
We're still working on that, aren't we?
Yeah, I'm still stripping.
Just not in like a strip club. You do it on the street.
That's my backup plan. Like if your business doesn't work out, worst case scenario, I'm going somewhere.
Why you? Why can't I be the stripper?
I'm not comfortable with that.
Okay. Okay. So usually at the end of every episode, we do a listener lounge question. So I thought this time we would add one of the listener questions in and let you answer it for me. So I think this is a good one because I think this really is kind of up your alley when it comes to what you need to help you feel more comfortable with my business.
Yeah.
So the question is, what kinds of things does the business owner, so like this example, me, need to explain to you to help increase your understanding? And we just kind of talked about this earlier about, I can see my vision for my business. I can see very clearly where I want it to go. I'm in this world. You're not.
Yeah.
This is not your realm. This is not your lane. And you're not in my head to see what I envision the future looking like.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have as far as like what else could I have done or could someone else do to better explain their vision and their business to make you feel more comfortable?
Well, I think some people are visual learners, and I think some people are tactile learners, and some spouses may need a business plan to understand where you're going. Some may not. Some may be okay with just your thoughts and your dreams. And for me personally, I think I just have to, like I said, I equate it to certain other things. So when you come home and you're all excited because you want to buy a GIF photo booth, right? And you say, well, it's only, $4,000. Well, immediately I calculate how many times you have to use that photo booth to make up the money for that photo booth before I say it's a good job or not, or a good deal.
Yeah, I'm going to throw in a little side note here. I like how everything in our life, so if we want to go on vacation somewhere, it's not about how much money it costs. It's about how many weddings do I have to shoot. So now our lives are no longer, well, it's going to cost this much for us to do this. It's, well, you're going to have to shoot 2 weddings in order for us to do this. So our currency has changed, which is
like
really
Bitcoin,
interesting.
We just made up our own currency.
We did. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, our trip cost 3 weddings. And
But yeah, no, I think that's true. I think it's really important to understand like what your spouse or your significant other, like what's their language, what language they speak. Because if you're speaking flowers and rainbows and big dreams and their language is Excel spreadsheets and business plans, you have to get on the same page.
Yeah, you got to relate it to what they know, and a lot of times it's not going to click until that happens. Yeah.
Well, thank you for chatting tonight.
I'm always available.
You gonna do this again?
Sure.
Okay. It's not so scary after a while, right?
Bring me some questions.
Well, next time we'll have to find a more interesting topic than just,
stripping.
Well, yeah, we can talk about that later.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I love you.
Love you.
All right. Bye. So I want to give a huge shout out to my husband. Thank you so much for being willing to have this conversation with me for the world to hear. I hope that those of you listening found it interesting, that we didn't bore you too much, and that you were able to get something from it, whether it was now you have a better understanding of how to talk to your spouse about your business, or maybe you could listen to this with your significant other so that y'all can understand each other a little bit more. The key really is conversation. You have to have these conversations where you are each listening to each other respectably. You are allowing each other to explain and understand and ask questions and not come from a defensive or hurtful place. So if you are struggling with this with your own relationship, I highly suggest that you take some time to sit down and say, look, we need to have this conversation so that we can make sure we are on the same page. And I need you to come at it from a place of understanding and trying to understand versus coming at it in a defensive manner. If you are still struggling with this and you have questions about how Derek and I have approached these conversations, because in all honesty, there have been times where we've had these conversations and one or both of us has been defensive, one or both of us has ended up upset, just like I was before we recorded this episode. So if you have questions about how we have approached these conversations, how I have handled my emotions through them, what I have said or done that has helped our conversations run more smoothly, or what I wish I had done at times, feel free to message me. I really want this to be a place where you feel like you can reach out to me with your questions and needing help, or maybe you have some advice for somebody else, something that you've done in your relationship that has helped and you think it'll help other women too. Please, please, please let us know. You can go to Facebook, to the Girl Means Business group. If you're not already a member there, just Google or go to Facebook and type in Girl Means Business. The group and the page should come up. Add yourself to the group, follow the page, go into the group and start a conversation. See what other women are asking, offer advice, ask for help, or you can always send me a message. I'm more than happy to give you my thoughts and ideas. All right, ladies, that's going to do it for this week. I know it's another long episode, but I think it was worthwhile. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for going along with this crazy journey of mine. And I will see you next week, same time, same place. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to click the subscribe button so you never miss when a new episode goes live. Then head over to iTunes and leave a quick review to let other people know just how much you loved it. Thanks, ladies. See you next week.